They say miracles are rare, little flickers of light that only touch a life once in a while. Yet for one man and his loyal German shepherd, that flicker would blaze into a flame on a day neither could have predicted. Their paths had been torn, apart for a full year, separated by sheer chance and the kind of twists life throws when no one's ready. But fate, quiet and patient, waited in the most unexpected place, a small, unassuming shelter. And on that day, a single moment inside its walls would bend the course of both their lives forever. In the coastal town of Brighton, where the salty wind carried the cries of gulls and the distant thrum of waves, firefighter Ethan Cole lived, a steady, work-worn life. He had faced walls of flame, nights without sleep, and losses that left their mark. But nothing had tested him like the year to come. Because before the reunion could take shape, their story began with a scene so ordinary, it almost seemed forgettable. It was his day off, the kind where time moved a little slower. The morning sun spilled across the driveway as Ethan crouched beside his old truck, grease staining his fingertips. The warm metallic scent of motor oil tangled with the faint perfume of the sea drifting up from the harbor. From the kitchen came the slow whistle of a kettle, a quiet reminder of comfort. Outside, Ranger, his ever-watchful German shepherd, patrolled the yard with a calm confidence, the same quiet diligence Ethan brought to his work. Ranger wasn't just a pet. He was a partner in every sense of the word, steadfast through long, exhausting shifts, there to greet Ethan with a wagging tail and bright eyes that seemed to say, "You're home. I've been waiting." Their backyard had always been a place of safety, surrounded by a sturdy fence Ethan had built years ago. But time has a way of wearing even the strongest things down, and a section of that fence had begun to lean. Ethan had noticed it more than once, mentally circling the task of repair, but life's constant demands kept pushing it off. That afternoon, while Ethan worked under the sink, tightening pipes against a slow leak, Ranger's world shifted in the smallest of ways. A scent, a new one, drifted through the air. Ears pricking, he followed it to the weathered section of fence, where the wood bent outward just enough to tempt a curious nose. Beyond the narrow gap lay a street ranger had only ever known from the other end of a leash, and in that single pause, caught between caution and instinct, curiosity tipped the balance. Across the street, a golden retriever trotted beside its owner, its fur catching sunlight like rippling gold. Ranger froze, gaze locked, heart tapping faster. He had seen this dog before, once or twice from a distance, but never so close enough to catch the mingled scents of grass, salt, and something warm and familiar. The pull was subtle, but irresistible. Without a backward glance, Ranger slipped through the gap. His paws landed on the warm pavement, and in an instant the world widened, louder, brighter, and full of scents that called him forward. The retriever turned a corner, its tail disappearing into shadow. Ranger's pace quickened, nails tapping against the sidewalk, weaving through dapples of sun and shade. In his mind, he wasn't running away. He was following a thread he didn't understand, but couldn't ignore. But when he rounded the corner, the golden had vanished as if the air had swallowed it whole. Ranger stilled, circling, listening. The air here was heavier, tinged with oil, rust, and the sour bite of trash bins. He pressed on, his nose low, searching for the trail. As the afternoon slipped toward dusk, excitement gave way to unease. The familiar scent of home was gone, replaced by the strange, sharp smells of streets he had never known. By the time the sky burned orange and then dimmed to blue, Ranger's paws ached, and an unfamiliar heaviness settled in his chest. Alone now, he curled behind a stack of crates in a narrow alley, unaware this would be the first night in a long, uncertain journey. Back at home, Ethan straightened from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag. The warm light through the window seemed softer now. and the house felt unusually still. Ranger wasn't by the back door as usual. He wasn't in the yard either. Then Ethan saw it. The leaning section of fence, nails pulled free, a gap wide, enough for trouble. A cold rush of dread struck hard. Grabbing his jacket and phone, Ethan began calling Ranger's name into the streets. Neighbors shook their heads. Some thought they might have seen a dog, but none could be sure. Every unanswered call tightened the knot in his chest. Streetlights hummed on. His voice grew hoarse. By the time he stopped at the corner, the night, air biting through his jacket, one truth settled like a weight in his bones. Ranger wasn't just missing, he was gone. The next morning before sunrise, Ethan was out with a stack of flyers. Ranger's photo, bright eyes, ears high, looked back at him from every pole, shop window, and street lamp in town. He searched shelters, drove slowly through neighborhoods, followed every tip, even the ones that ended in disappointment. Weeks blurred into months. Winter came early, frosting the edges of his flyers, tearing some free to drift like pale ghosts down empty streets. While Ethan searched, Ranger learned the rough language of the streets, avoiding fights, finding scraps, keeping to the shadows when the rain made the city smell like metal. There were moments when the sound of boots on pavement or the creak of a gate made his tail twitch with hope, but the scent was never right. Nearly a year after leaving Ethan's yard, Ranger wandered into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. For days, he lingered near the driveway of an elderly man who watched him with growing concern. Eventually, the man picked up the phone and made a call. The next morning, Ranger's long year on the streets came to an end. The animal control van pulled up to a modest brick shelter on the edge of town. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mingled with the faint, anxious scent of dozens of dogs. Ranger, still weary and exhausted, wazzled into a clean kennel lined with a blanket and a stainless steel water bowl. The staff didn't know his name, so they gave him a new one, Shadow, because he tended to melt into the darkest corner of the kennel, watching the world quietly from a distance. The first days were a blur of gentle hands and unfamiliar routines. He was bathed, the warm water rinsing away months of dirt and matted fur. A vet checked his ribs, treated a small cut on his paw, and ran careful fingers along his spine. The food came regularly now, 2 full bowls a day, and his body began to regain some of its lost strength. But his spirit was slower to heal, while other dogs barked excitedly at visitors, tails wagging in hopeful arcs. Shadow stayed curled up, head resting on his paws. If someone knelt by the bars and spoke softly, he might lift his eyes, but his gaze always drifted toward the door as if waiting for someone specific. The shelter workers noticed. "He's a good boy," one of them murmured to a colleague. "Bute's holding out for something or someone." They gave him time. They offered treats, short walks, and quiet company, hoping to coax him out of his shell. Bit by bit, he began to respond, his tail giving a tentative wag when a familiar staff member approached, his ears pricking at the sound of laughter in the hallway. Still, a part of him seemed to be waiting for a voice he hadn't heard in nearly a year. Almost a full year had passed since that cold evening when Ranger had slipped through the fence. Ethan had stopped making daily calls to shelters, but the thought of adopting a new dog had begun to take root, not to replace Ranger, but to fill the silent spaces in his home. One Saturday morning, with a pale winter sun spilling over the rooftops, Ethan drove Veto, the Brighton Animal Rescue. The place smelled faintly of pine from the holiday decorations strung along the hallway. He told the receptionist he was open to meeting any dog who needed a home, trusting that he'd know when he found the right one. He walked slowly down their rows of kennels, eager faces pressed against the bars, tails wagged in dizzy excitement, paws scratched at the floor. Ethan smiled and greeted each one, but his steps kept carrying him forward. Then he saw it, a kennel near the end, quieter than the rest. In the corner lay a German shepherd, back turned, head low. Something in the slope of the shoulders, the curve of the ears, made Ethan's breath hitch. He stepped closer. "Hey, buddy." The dog shifted, lifting his head, and then their eyes met. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. Those eyes, warm amber, flecked with gold. Heck knew them as well as his own reflection. "Ranger." His voice cracked on the name. Inside the kennel, the dog blinked, then stood. His tail gave one hesitant wag, then another, faster, until it was a blur. A soft whine escaped his throat, rising into a sound Ethan hadn't heard in nearly a year. One of the shelter staff appeared, sensing what was happening. "Shadow," she said in surprise, fumbling for the keys. The latch clicked, the door swung open, and Ranger was in Ethan's arms, licking his face, pressing his weight against him as if to make sure this wasn't another dream. Around them, the other dogs barked. The staff smiled through tears, and Ethan held on, whispering over and over, "I found you. I found you." The drive home felt like a dream Ethan didn't dare wake from. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears lifted to the wind, the winter sunlight catching the faint sheen of his newly cleaned coat. Every few minutes, Ethan would reach over to rest his hand on Rears's back, just to feel the solid warmth there, to remind himself this was real. When they pulled into the driveway, Ranger jumped out and trotted to the front door as if no time had passed. At all. Ethan laughed, half in joy, half in disbelief, as he fumbled with the keys. The moment the door opened, Ranger padded through the house, pausing in familiar spots. The rug by the fireplace, the sliding door to the yard, the spot by Ethan's bed, where he used to curl up at night. Ethan watched, a tightness in his chest, loosening with every step. It was as if Ranger had been holding the blueprint of this home in his heart all along. That night, Ethan lit a fire in the hearth. Ranger lay at his feet, stretched out on his side, one paw resting lightly on Ethan's boot. Outside, the wind rattled. The eaves, but inside was warmth, steady, unshakable, the kind that comes from finding what you thought was lost forever. Ethan made himself a quiet promise. No matter what, he would protect this second chance. The fence would be repaired first thing. In the morning, no more waiting, no more taking the presence of his best friend for granted. Leaning forward, he rested his forehead against Ranger's. "You're home now," he murmured, "and I'm never letting you go again." In the weeks that followed, Ethan's story began to spread. First, among friends and neighbors, then far beyond Brighton. One evening, he posted a photo of Ranger curled up by the fire along with the caption, "After a year apart, we found our way back to each other. If you're looking for a pet, please check your local shelter first. There are so many Rangers out there waiting for their person." The post struck a chord. Comments poured in, people sharing their own reunions or the moment they adopted a dog that changed their life. Local news stations called wanting to feature their story. The shelter where Ethan found Ranger saw a spike in adoptions, each one a quiet ripple of change born from a single reunion. Ethan realized something profound. Losing Ranger had been one of the hardest chapters of his life, but finding him again had given him a platform to help others. He started volunteering on his days off, walking dogs, helping with fundraisers, and speaking at adoption events. For Ranger, life settled back into a comfortable rhythm. Morning walks by the harbor, afternoons dozing in sunlit patches on the kitchen floor, evenings at Ethan's side. But now there was a difference. Every time they passed their paired fence, Ethan would give Ranger a small smile, a silent reminder of how close they'd come to losing this forever. On quiet nights, with Rare's steady breathing filling the room, Ethan knew one truth above all. Some bonds aren't broken by time or distance. They're simply waiting to be found.